Well, if you were clicking on this video for some happy, feel good, uplifting advice or inspirational quotes on being a calmer mom, then I'm sorry to disappoint, but that's not the route that I'm going to go in this video. Instead, we're going to talk about St. Thomas Aquinas. Maybe that's not what you thought you were getting into, but we're going to talk about St. Thomas's teaching that grace builds on nature. And as we do that, I'm just going to spend a typical homeschool day with me at home in my kitchen doing what I do on homeschool days, which is I feed people and teach people and take care of little people. So fun stuff. It is actually fun stuff. I love it. It's my favorite thing in the world. And because it's my favorite thing in the world, I want to enjoy it, make the most of it. And I want my kids to enjoy our time together here in our home. I want them to look back on this time fondly. I want to nourish our relationships. I want them to stick around when they're older. You can't control everything when it comes to your kids. But, a lot of times, especially if like multiple kids don't stick around, don't really want to have much to do with the parents, there might be a common denominator there. Maybe it's the parents. I don't know. Who's to say? But as a mother, one thing that I just really know is important and helps to build quality relationships with my family and sets the tone for our home is my calmness, my own temperament and tone in the home. And one thing that I think a lot of modern ladies, we're all trying to figure this thing out, right? Because if you grew up a millennial, actually, if you grew up, any time in recent generations, homemaking wasn't given glowing reviews. It just wasn't talked about very positively. And that probably wasn't a path that was even presented as a legitimate option. So now there are a lot of us who have chosen that path. We're doing this homemaking thing. We're home all the time, and we're trying to figure this out. So a lot of grace there. We just have to, pray for grace as we figure this thing out. But I think where the mark gets missed is we separate the body and the soul, and we isolate those two things, especially when it talks about, trying to be a more calm mother, a more virtuous mother in the home. We either just look at the soul and we make it all about character flaws and virtue and, just talk about this mindset, this prayer routine or that prayer routine or whatever. And if we could just maybe have a little more faith, then we would be more calm. We would reach our goals of tranquility in the home. And while an increase in faith is always a blessing and should increase our virtue as well, when it's totally separated from considering the bodily aspect, then it's lacking. On the other hand, in the health world, which I love the health world, I'm very into health and nature and all those things, we can tend to forget about the soul. So we're just talking about blood test and this vitamin, that supplement, this mineral, that diet. And if we could just fix those physical things, then we would, restore balance and grow in virtue, which there's some truth to that. But when we separate it from considering the soul, then that's lacking as well. So that's why I wanted to talk about grace building on nature. My days just go so much better. I feel better. I feel more put together when I start by making my bed, taking a few minutes to get myself dressed, and just basic hygiene. I mean, I know that kind of sounds like common sense, but when you've got little kids that are up and running around, it can get missed. But when I actually make time to brush my teeth, get myself ready, and take care of myself, including my skincare, I just feel better. When it comes to skincare, I love Dime Beauty because they have clean, luxurious skincare and fragrance products that don't break the bank. And as far as my daily routine, one thing I use morning and night is hyaluronic acid. So hyaluronic acid is actually a naturally occurring substance in our body. It's something that our body produces, but we produce a lot of it when we're younger. We produce less of it as we age. And hyaluronic acid is a humectant, so it attracts and retains moisture. It can hold up to 1,000 times its weight in water, so it keeps our skin nice and moist and smooth. So as you can imagine, we get older, we produce less, then our skin is drier and it just doesn't look as youthful. So I start my skincare routine while I wash my face, and then I apply hyaluronic acid. But one thing about this is you don't want to stop there. Like, if all you're gonna do is put hyaluronic acid on your skin, don't do it, because it will actually dry your skin out if you don't apply some kind of really moisturizing serum or cream over top of the hyaluronic acid. So after I put this on, then I apply the TBT cream from Dime. And this is a clean, gentle retinol alternative. So it contains bakuchiol, which is a plant-derived substance that is a retinol alternative to keep skin looking youthful and reduce appearance of fine lines and wrinkles without the harsh effects of retinol. I do not like putting harsh things on my skin. It just feels kind of counterintuitive, but this goes on so smooth and it is so gentle while giving me that retinol-like effect. And then as far as eyes, when you're up throughout the night with a baby, nursing, and just not getting the greatest sleep, you're going to see it in the eyes. We all know that. So I really like their eye duo. As far as nighttime goes, I use the TBT eye cream. It also contains bakuchiol, so you're getting that retinol-like effect for hydration and smoothing and brightening the skin around your eyes. So that I use at night. And then in the morning, the Luminosity Eye Serum is so great. It has caffeine and niacinamide. So caffeine reduces the puffiness, and the niacinamide helps to brighten your eyes too. So to reduce the appearance of dark circles, because concealer can only go so far. When you use my code HOPEWELL26, you will get 26% off your order from Dime Beauty. I'll put my code, my link, and all the details below the video. So just tap the more button below the screen and check it out. When the physical body is out of balance or depleted or under an immense amount of stress, that puts us in a state of moral fragility. We are at greater risk of falling into sin, or maybe not falling, but just like straight up walking into it when we are lacking what we need from nature for our body to do bodily processes. So it's not impossible to behave virtuously, to grow in virtue under, extreme cases of stress, but it's a lot more difficult. Like I said, we're just more morally fragile. And when I think about that in terms of modern life and our modern food system, I just really am struck with how evil the degradation of our modern food, how evil that whole thing has been because of how it affects people and it puts people in a state of moral fragility. So the adulteration of our food and water supply for the sake of increasing profit, y'all know what I'm talking about. Spraying really harmful stuff, using harmful stuff, and essentially poisoning our food and water supply, and chelating minerals so that the food that we are eating is so depleted in minerals, it's basically like, empty calories. That's a crime against humanity. It's nothing short of evil. And in fact, I actually looked up the definition of genocide, and it's a lot broader than what one might think. It's not just what we think of when we think of people being persecuted and wiped out for, their nationality or whatever, but also any kind of action by a group or government that makes it incredibly difficult or nearly impossible for a people group to reproduce. That also falls under the, qualifications that qualifies as genocide. If think about it, if people can't have children, they can't, continue their race then or their nation, then that's genocide too. And I look at, yeah, what's being done to our food and our environment, and the infertility rates are just skyrocketing, and more so all the time. People are struggling to get pregnant, to have children, and there are a lot of factors there. Some of that's by choice, right? People are choosing not to have children, um, despite other aspects. So I'm talking about even people who do make a good wage and maybe have a good living situation and access to good food. Those people are choosing to have fewer and fewer children. So it's multifactorial, but um, it's absolutely criminal what is being done to our food supply, and how does that affect us as mothers? So, if we're mothers, that means that we've been able to get pregnant and, have children. But that's really just the beginning of motherhood. Motherhood, it's not just the work of growing a baby. It continues beyond that. Hopefully, breastfeeding, if you're able to do that, and then nurturing and caring for that life for the rest of their life. And that takes a lot of energy. And that's going to be the focal point of today's discussion. It's energy, having the energy to complete the tasks of motherhood in a calm, joyful, energized way without feeling like you are clawing and, just scraping every day just to keep your head above water. And so, of course, the spiritual aspect is so important because we all need grace if we want to accomplish that. But if we go back to that quote from St. Thomas, grace builds on nature. We do not have the ability to rewrite biology. I think we all recognize that in larger things when it comes to, modern ideologies where people perhaps would like to rewrite biology so that they are, a man or a woman or something else that they weren't born as. But, we need to realize that as mothers too, we can't rewrite our biological needs for nutrition and to be really fueled by elements in nature that were created by God. We can't just pray our way out of needing those things. God created nature and everything in it. He created us. He created all things, visible and invisible. And He created us to be dependent on other aspects of creation, whether that is the lights that He made, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. We're dependent on that. We're dependent on a healthy circadian rhythm. Everyone knows what that is. That's the rhythm dictated by the sun. Tells us, when to wake and sleep. But we're also dependent on the infradian rhythm, the rhythm of the moon, the lunar rhythm. Especially for us women, that dictates our cycles, or at least it should if we're in a healthy place. But one thing that can really throw that out of whack is exposure to blue light and not enough exposure to natural light. So, a woman who is getting adequate exposure to natural light and who's not looking at a screen all day, she should cycle about every 29 days. I know we've been told, oh, well, there's a wide range of healthy, but there's really not. It should be the cycle should be about 29 days long. That's how long the lunar cycle is. And most women ovulate with the full moon and menstruate with the new moon. Sometimes that can be flipped, where you can ovulate with the new moon and menstruate with the full moon. That's less common, but there should be a pattern there, a predictable pattern. I think it's very easy for us to believe that our ancestors, the women that came before us, were just ignorant and they just got pregnant all the time. They just didn't know what was going on. That is so far from the truth. They were so much more in tune with nature and therefore with their bodies. That's how they learned to measure things. That's how they learned, planting and harvesting cycles as far as farming and cultivating. Because they spent time in nature as God intended. So, of course, they knew when their the rhythm of their menstrual cycle and when menstruation would come, when ovulation would come. They did know these things. We've lost this knowledge, and we've also lost the rhythm of our body, working with nature because of specifically when it comes to light. It's affected our reproductive cycle and our infradian rhythm. And then when I think about the food that God made for us, God made the land, He made the food, plant and animal food. We have adulterated those things too with modern innovations where we now make food in factories or we make, substances that we label as food. And the way that God designed food is to be a self-recycling system. So, plants and animals are nourished from the land. So they, have their vitamin and mineral content that comes into them from the soil. So the plants and animals are taking vitamins and minerals from the soil and the sun. And then we eat those plants and animals. We get the vitamins and minerals. That's one way we get the vitamins and minerals, through the soil. We don't eat the soil. We eat the middleman, so to say, the plants and animals. So what happens when we try to bypass that by eating a diet of junk food, fast food, processed food? There are consequences, just like the consequence of women no longer cycling with the moon and struggling with infertility. It's the same when we are depleted in essential vitamins and minerals because of poor soil quality. We literally do not have the fuel to produce energy to do bodily functions. And we can tell ourselves that's fine all day long. We can joke about oh, well, just Diet Coke and Sonic every day. That's just my cute personality trait and quirk. But that doesn't rewrite biology. We can't change biology just by the story that we tell ourselves. Trust me, I've tried to do this before, right? Oh, well, it's really not that bad. But my body was able to tell that it actually was that bad. And that's when we get symptoms, which symptoms are just messengers. That's our body speaking to us, saying something's not right here. And so I think where we miss the mark, we want to be calm, virtuous mothers who are joyful and pleasant and bask in that morning sun, enjoying a nice cup of coffee and maybe some good raw cream from a Jersey cow or something like that. That's the goal, right? We want to be that. But yet here we are, with mom rage, exploding at every little thing that sets us off, with chronic fatigue and brain fog, barely able to make it through the day, holding on to an extra 20, 30, 50 pounds that we just can't seem to lose. So where are we missing the mark? I think we're missing the mark by trying to rewrite the nature part. Remember, we said grace builds on nature. We're trying to rewrite our biological needs and say, well, I don't really need this. I don't really need that. I don't, it's okay if my sleep isn't that great. It's okay if I have constant chronic stress in my life. It's okay if I'm looking at my phone all day, which is blue light essentially. It's okay if I don't really go outside and I just hang out inside all day. It's okay if I'm always eating processed food, because we don't want to be hard on ourselves. But the thing is that those things are affecting. I'm not saying all this to be hard on myself or on anybody. I'm just saying, if we're realistic, our biology doesn't agree with those takes. Our biology would say, but wait, I still have these needs. So that's the secret, I think, to being a calm mom, is just realizing that if we want grace to build us up, we need to give it a natural foundation. As Catholics, we say that we not only want to avoid sin, but we want to avoid the near occasion of sin. So we're not, we strive to avoid sin, but also we want to think about every little situation or scenario that maybe puts us really close to stepping into sin, and we want to avoid those things too. And for moms, I think we need to think about our environment. Maybe it's the screen time. Maybe it's the food. Maybe it's poor sleep. Maybe it's engaging in stressful situations. And we just need to say no to those things, so that we can be cultivating fertile soil for seeds of faith to be watered with grace and blossom into virtue.